This video will contain spoilers for the first 2 Ace Attorney games. It will also contain discussions of potentially triggering topics regarding mental health. Ace Attorney, the fun, silly lawyer game that follows Phoenix Wright, a new defense attorney, as he takes on cases and turns them around. I of course knew what Ace Attorney was long before I ever played the games. Truly, who doesn't know about the humorous game known for its iconic OBJECTION! And lots of yaoi. However, once I began playing, I soon discovered that my understanding of it was very surface level. Sure, it had those fun moments the game is known for, but it also delved into some rather dark topics, and it really didn't shy away from them either. A lot of cases in Ace Attorney include a lot of dark and serious subject matter. Our main character, Phoenix Wright, actually goes through a lot of difficult topics throughout the game. Despite the game's willingness to openly talk about some dark subjects, there is one thing that is left ambiguous and isn't spoken on directly the way that similar situations in the games are. Prosecutor Miles Edgeworth chooses death. If you're watching this video, I'm sure you're already familiar with this quote, but just in case you're not and clicked on this video purely based on vibes, I'll catch you up. Miles Edgeworth is the main prosecutor in the first Ace Attorney game. He had saved Phoenix Wright in their childhood after Phoenix was falsely accused of stealing his lunch money. Because of this, he was part of the reason why Phoenix decided to become a defense attorney. Unfortunately, after reuniting in the courtroom, Phoenix finds that Miles is now very different from the kid who once defended him. Prosecutor Miles Edgeworth was now a cruel, vindictive bully who would stop at nothing to get his guilty verdict. However, the cracks begin to form after Phoenix beats him in court, and Edgeworth's demon persona only breaks down more and more. Eventually, Phoenix ends up having to defend Edgeworth, who has been accused of murder. In this case, we learn all about Edgeworth's tragic backstory, the murder of his father, how he blamed himself for it, and how this intense need for justice consumed him and turned him into the man he is now. Of course, Phoenix Wright saved the day and not only secured Edgeworth a not guilty verdict, but he puts the man who killed Edgeworth's father behind bars. Things are looking up for Edgeworth as the game ends with him as a free man who may now finally begin processing his trauma while being surrounded by supportive friends. And then, in the next game, he's gone. He's replaced by his sort of sister, Franziska von Karma, as the game's main prosecutor, and we aren't given any clear explanation as to why. Well, you're given some explanation if you play Rise from the Ashes, but I skipped that case on my first playthrough, plus that case wasn't released until after the second game was, so for the first few years of people playing these games, they were left with very little to go off of. The conversation with Franziska gives us a little more context. We learn about the note, but they also say that he vanished while the game refers to it as his death. It's quite confusing. We as the player are clearly meant to believe that Edgeworth has died. This is especially clear because Maya is our stand-in for this whole part of the game. Both Franziska and Phoenix clearly have a better understanding of what's going on, but Maya has no clue, just like us as the player. It becomes especially clear that we are supposed to think that he has died after learning about the note. Prosecutor Miles Edgeworth chooses death. I think we all know what this sounds like. Without saying it directly, we're meant to believe that Edgeworth chose death. But why don't they directly say it? Choosing death is something that's brought up again and again in Ace Attorney cases. They even say it outright without dancing around it, that certain characters have attempted it. They even say the specific word that I probably can't say on here, but they don't for Edgeworth. It can't be censorship. We've already discussed that they've had no problem including it before and since. So why is it different here? Why is everything about Edgeworth and his disappearance shrouded in ambiguity? What does it mean to choose death? First, I want to lay out what we know is canon. 1. Edgeworth left a note. 2. He spent a year in Europe. 3. Franziska believed he was alive. And 4. Phoenix was angry when he returned. Not a whole lot. Like I said, a lot about it is shrouded in ambiguity, most notably Phoenix and Franziska. It's never made clear whether or not they thought that Edgeworth was dead. Franziska claims that she knows he's alive, but the way she speaks about it implies that the general assumption is that he is dead. It's even trickier when it comes to Phoenix. His dialogue can easily be read as someone angry at his friend for leaving, or someone who's grieving. I'm fairly certain that canonically he didn't think Edgeworth was really dead, but with how ambiguous it is, it's very easy to interpret it countless ways. Let's take a look at the note. Prosecutor Miles Edgeworth chooses death. As many Ace Attorney fans will point out to you, the important part of this note is the prosecutor part. Edgeworth left to Europe to figure out what it meant to be a prosecutor. After the events of the first game, he realized he wasn't playing his part, and he needed to leave so he could figure out what it meant to be a prosecutor. In doing this, he is killing that part of him, the demon prosecutor who didn't know what he was supposed to be doing. Sure, it's dramatic, but it's Edgeworth. It's to be expected. It's so expected that of course the people closest to him, Phoenix and Franziska, would of course know what he meant. Phoenix would be angry that after all he did, Edgeworth seemingly quit and ran away. And Franziska wouldn't want her little brother to just run away like that. There is a very important factor that not many people bring up when discussing Edgeworth's disappearance. The creators behind Ace Attorney made the first game with very little references to Japanese culture, so that it would be easier to localize. However, they were told they wouldn't be getting any localizations, so for the other 2 games in the series, they went all in on the references to their own culture. In Japan, there's a concept called johatsu. It refers to people who vanish from their lives without a trace. According to Wikipedia, it has been theorized that Japan's harsh work culture, in combination with the lack of familial and community support, has contributed to the prevalence of johatsu in Japan. Furthermore, quitting a company is seen as shameful in Japanese culture. Becoming johatsu is a potential outcome. People choose to become johatsu so they can escape a number of terrible situations, ranging from living with depression to being in danger. For many, it's used as a way to get a fresh start. Spoiler alert, Edgeworth does in fact show back up again in the second game, so this explanation fits really well for Edgeworth. It also fits for another character in Ace Attorney, Misty Faye. While people go missing everywhere, Japan's unique conditions make the culture surrounding these disappearances very different from how, let's say, the US handles missing persons. I'm obviously from the West, and I can only really understand the localization, so I can't say with certainty that this is the case, but maybe for Ace Attorney fans in Japan, what happened with Edgeworth was completely understandable to them. This concept explains so much. Why does nobody talk about what happened? It's a difficult subject. Why is Phoenix so angry? I'm sure it's infuriating to find out that your friend chose to disappear without a trace, and for him to then just show back up like nothing happened. If people knew Edgeworth was alive, why didn't they go looking for him? In Japan, johatsu aren't able to be found, and there's no police interference. Why do they act like he's dead? Because he might as well have been. So, this clears up things perfectly, right? Well, not exactly. At least, I don't think so. I personally believe there is no such thing as too much analyzation, and I think that there can be multiple explanations to things that, in some cases, can coexist. There are numerous fan interpretations, but the majority of them share the idea that Edgeworth intended or wanted to choose death. There are a lot of arguments to be made that Edgeworth was in the headspace to choose death. I personally really like this interpretation, but me liking something doesn't mean it has any merit. If you remember, earlier when discussing johatsu, I said that one reason people choose to disappear is depression. When doing research, I learned that a lot of people decide to disappear rather than choosing death, because choosing death is a lot harder on the people around them. So if Edgeworth intended to become johatsu, it could definitely be in part due to his mental state. So, can this be supported by the games? In 1-4, Edgeworth famously attempts to sabotage his own trial by claiming that he was guilty for his father's murder. Whether he'd be receiving a prison sentence or the death penalty, in doing this he's throwing his life away. I'd imagine most people accused of a crime, whether they believe they had done it or not, don't actively try to get themselves found guilty. However, Edgeworth isn't like most people. Edgeworth, like I said earlier, has a very strong sense of justice. If he believes he is guilty of a crime, then he believes that he should be punished. I guess the argument to be made here is, does that mean he actively sought out death? In Rise from the Ashes, Edgeworth asserts that he doesn't trust his memory and only relies on solid evidence. This is of course likely because he thought he remembered killing his father when that's not what happened. After learning the truth, he no longer relies on just his memory when making assessments. But Edgeworth has always been extremely thorough when it comes to backing up his claims. He doesn't fly by the seat of his pants the way Phoenix does. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Phoenix makes a remark at some point about how prepared Edgeworth is with his claims. Either way, I don't think Edgeworth would ever solely rely on his memory. Yet, he uses mere dreams to argue that he was guilty. The guilt Edgeworth felt, despite being unsubstantiated, consumed him, and it altered how he lived his life. It fogged his judgment and made him seek out punishment for something he believed he did. People who choose death often have a warped sense of reality. A leading cause of this act is mental illness, after all. Another leading cause is the death of a family member, as well as various other forms of trauma. Ultimately, I don't think it's a far cry to claim that Edgeworth wanted to choose death through means of being found guilty. Things getting better isn't a quick fix for mental illness, and while things were looking up for Edgeworth at the end of 1-4, that doesn't automatically mean his years and years of struggling would vanish. Plus, things did not get better for Edgeworth. Despite being found not guilty, the murder accusations turned the whispers about Edgeworth into shouts. Rumors followed Edgeworth since the beginning of his career, and it only got worse after the trial. In our first interaction with Edgeworth in 1-5, he is clearly very irritable. I'd argue more than usual. It especially seems out of place when we last saw him in 1-4, he was smiling and taking steps to being a warmer person. Throughout Rise from the Ashes, it becomes increasingly clear that Edgeworth is not doing well. One scene in specific stands out to me. What letter of If you're having trouble reading, I'll read it for you. It says, letter of resignation. Resignation? Edgeworth, you don't mean... I'm tired, right? I feel as if something inside me has died. But Mr. Edgeworth, none of it is your fault. I know the path I've walked. You don't need to tell me. And the path I've walked hasn't been a just one. I can't forgive myself for what I've done. And no one else should forgive me either. This scene is just so sad. Edgeworth is tired. He feels as though something inside of him has died. These are not the words of a mentally sound man. And of course, a lot more happens in Rise from the Ashes that aids to Edgeworth's poor mental state and confusion about what it meant to be a prosecutor. I think one of the most compelling pieces of evidence is how Edgeworth interacts with Adrian Andrews. Andrews is a character from the final case of the second game. She had a strong bond with her mentor, Celeste Impax. Unfortunately, after Matt and Guard ruined her life, Celeste Impax chose death. Following this, Andrews made an attempt on her own life, but failed. And then, Edgeworth threatens to expose her if she won't do it herself, and then when she implies she'd die if she were exposed, Edgeworth says, if you're going to say you would choose death, that is of no concern to me. Well, there is certainly a lot to unpack here. First, and most notably, he uses the phrase choose death to describe the act, meaning he's perfectly aware of the implications of that choice and wording. In doing this, he also directly references his note. This to me confirms that the note was meant to be exactly what it seems like. Whether he actually meant it, or it was a cover-up for his disappearance, or if it was just him being dramatic, is still up in the air. But I think more about this interaction can contribute to the argument that he meant it. The reason Edgeworth does and says all of these horrible things is to help Andrews. He needs the truth so that both she and the other innocent parties involved in this case won't be harmed. Underneath it all, he is doing this for the right reasons, to seek the truth. Nothing is getting the truth out of Adrian, so Edgeworth is forced to go to the extreme. But why bring up choosing death specifically? I think it can be read as projection. Edgeworth tells Adrian that he will get the truth from her before she dies. Getting the truth out will save her. He's essentially giving her a reason to live, albeit through extremely tough love. I think Edgeworth has been in Adrian's shoes. I think he was in a position where he thought it would be better if he chose death. But he didn't, and instead found a reason to live. Instead of choosing death, he decided to learn what it meant to be a prosecutor, so that he could find the truth and fight for it. Properly fulfilling the role of a prosecutor meant that he would save lives. I think that gave him a reason to live. He's presenting that same chance to Adrian. He's saying that before you go off and choose death, you can actually get a fresh start and save a life. I also think his cruelty in this situation can also be read as not just tough love, but more projecting. Edgeworth clearly has a lot of self-hatred, and upon seeing a person in the same situation he was in, I'm sure it would surface uncomfortable feelings about it. So, what does this all mean? Truthfully, it's up to you. Art is meant for interpretation, and I can't help but feel that Edgeworth's disappearance was left intentionally vague for fan interpretation, much like how other aspects of other characters are. But as for what I think Edgeworth intended to become Johatsu. Many people who become Johatsu do so in place of choosing death, and I think based on the evidence I presented, the same goes for Edgeworth. I think he ended up finding a reason to live by becoming a better prosecutor. I think both Franziska and Phoenix knew that Edgeworth was alive, which explains Phoenix's jump to anger upon his return. I think if Phoenix thought Edgeworth was truly dead, he'd be more frightened and confused than angry. Edgeworth is a complicated character, and Ace Attorney's structure doesn't make it very easy to understand him. However, I think that choosing death meant exactly what it sounded like. Thank you all for watching. I wanted to quickly give credit where credit's due. I first became aware of the concept of Johatsu and how it relates to Edgeworth thanks to Wendy Rocket's video, debunking 10 Ace Attorney plot misconceptions. If you're a fan of Ace Attorney, I highly recommend watching their videos. They are really good and very insightful. Thank you.